I still remember the first day I met him. The way his smile seemed to light up the room, like he carried summer wherever he went. It wasn't one of those dramatic movie moments. It was ordinary, quiet, and yet something about it felt like destiny had paused just to watch. He said his name with confidence, Ethan. The kind of name that sounded simple but carried weight. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he had that rare calmness that draws you in. I'd just started a new job, nervous and eager to prove myself, and he made it all feel easy. Every morning after that, he'd find a reason to stop by my desk, sometimes to ask about a report, sometimes to share a joke, sometimes just to smile. I'd roll my eyes, pretending to be annoyed, but deep down I looked forward to it. It was harmless at first, or so I thought. Weeks passed, and those small talks turned into lunches. Lunches turned into long evening walks. And before I even realized it, he had quietly built a home inside my heart. I wasn't naive. I'd been in relationships before, but this felt different, safe somehow. Like all the heartbreaks before him had led me here, to someone who would finally stay. He made me laugh in ways no one ever had. He remembered little details, the way I took my coffee, the books I loved, even the stories I'd told him once and forgotten. He made me believe that love didn't have to hurt. That maybe, just maybe, I'd found my peace. But sometimes peace can be deceptive. Because even the most beautiful dreams have cracks. Tiny ones, barely visible, but enough to let the truth leak through. It started small. He'd cancel plans at the last minute, claiming he had work calls or was feeling tired. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was normal. Everyone gets busy, right? Then there were the nights he seemed distracted. His phone would buzz and he'd tilt it away, pretending it was nothing. His laughter would fade the second I entered the room. Once I asked who he was talking to. He smiled and said, "Just a friend from work." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Because when you love someone, you choose faith over doubt. You tell yourself that your mind is just overthinking, that your heart is too fragile from old wounds. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Something isn't right." I ignored it. I drowned it in laughter, in date nights, in gifts and messages that said, "I love you," as if those 3 words could build a shield around the truth. Our first anniversary came, and he surprised me with a weekend getaway. Candles, roses, soft music, everything felt picture perfect. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. And yet, even as I looked into his eyes that night, smiling through candlelight, that same quiet unease brushed the edge of my thoughts. A shadow behind all that beauty. Maybe it was the way his phone never left his side. Maybe it was how he suddenly stopped talking about the future. Maybe it was just intuition, that unexplainable knowing that something is breaking beneath the surface. Still, I silenced it. Because I wanted this story to be different. I didn't know then that every smile he gave me carried a secret behind it. That the same lips that whispered, "I love you," were speaking lies to someone else. For now, I was still lost in the illusion, in the perfect beginning of a story that would soon turn into my worst heartbreak. It's strange how the smallest things can change everything. You think it'll take something big, a confession, a fight, a dramatic twist. But no, sometimes it starts with silence. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesdays used to be our nights. Dinner, a movie, something simple. But that evening he texted me, "Can we reschedule?" I'm swamped with work. Fair enough, I thought. Everyone gets busy. But then it happened again. And again. Suddenly our plans became maybe next week, and our conversations grew shorter. When we did meet, he was different. His laughter felt rehearsed, his eyes distracted. The warmth that used to pull me in now felt like a wall keeping me out. He'd check his phone constantly, smile faintly, type quickly, then lock the screen the moment I looked. Once, I reached for his hand and he flinched as if caught off guard. I told myself he was stressed. That's what love does. It gives excuses where there should be questions. But questions started forming anyway. Late one night, while we were watching a movie at his place, his phone lit up on the couch beside him. A name I didn't recognize. Just one message. A heart emoji. He picked up the phone so fast it startled me. Then he smiled, too casually, and said, "Just a friend teasing me." My stomach twisted, but I forced a laugh. "Oh, really?" He nodded, kissed my forehead, and changed the topic. I let it go, because sometimes it's easier to believe a comforting lie than to face a painful truth. Days turned into weeks. He started dressing up more for work, using cologne he hadn't worn in months. His phone now had a password, and when I asked about it, he just said, "Company policy. Security stuff." But his security stuff kept him away for hours, sometimes whole nights. And when he came back, there was always a reason. Meetings, deadlines, traffic jams. The first time I called him late at night and he didn't pick up, I remember staring at my ceiling, my heart pounding with a feeling I couldn't name. The second time it happened, I stopped calling altogether. Because deep down I knew. I started noticing things. Perfume that wasn't mine on his jacket, lipstick smudges on a coffee mug, even strands of hair too light to belong to me. But I said nothing. I wanted proof. So I watched, quietly, closely. One afternoon, I dropped by his office with lunch, a surprise, something thoughtful. His assistant smiled awkwardly when she saw me. "Is he here?" I asked. She hesitated. I think he stepped out with a client." Her voice wavered. She was lying. I could feel it. I left the food on his desk, walked out with a forced smile, and sat in my car for 10 whole minutes, shaking, numb, trying to breathe. That's when I saw him, across the street, walking out of a cafe with a woman I'd never seen before. She was laughing, touching his arm like they'd known each other for years. He looked happy, the kind of happy I hadn't seen in weeks. I didn't cry, not yet. I just watched, frozen, as they walked away together, disappearing into the crowd like two pieces that fit perfectly. That night he called me. His voice was cheerful. "Hey babe, long day. Sorry I couldn't call earlier." I said nothing at first, just listened to his lies, smooth and practiced. Then I asked softly, "Did you have a good time with your client today?" The silence on the other end said everything. He chuckled nervously. "What?" "Oh yeah, it was fine. Just coffee, you know." His tone cracked, just slightly. Enough for me to hear the truth hiding beneath it. That's when the first crack in the glass became visible. I hung up early that night saying I was tired. But really, I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling again, my mind replaying every detail. Every busy night, every unread message, every shift in his smile. I realized something painful but freeing. The man I loved didn't exist anymore. He'd been replaced by someone who lied with ease, someone who thought I'd never see past the charm. But I wasn't the same girl who once believed in fairy tales. I could feel something new stirring inside me. Not sadness this time, but anger. Quiet, steady, and sharp. And though I didn't know it yet, that anger would soon become my greatest weapon. There's a moment in every story where everything you believed shatters. For me, that moment came on a rainy Friday night, the kind that blurs city lights and makes everything feel like a slow, painful dream. He had told me he'd be working late again. By now, those words had lost their meaning. Still, a part of me clung to hope, that maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was all in my head. I didn't want proof anymore. I just wanted peace. But fate has a cruel way of answering the questions we're too afraid to ask. That evening, my best friend Maya called. She'd seen him. Her voice trembled through the phone. "Sophie, I don't know how to tell you this, but I just saw Ethan at Lavera's. He wasn't alone." Lavera's, our place? The restaurant where he once told me he wanted to spend forever with me. My breath caught. For a second, I couldn't speak. "Are you sure it was him?" "Positive. He's wearing the navy jacket you bought him." The world felt smaller suddenly. The rain outside echoed against the windows like a warning I'd ignored for too long. I didn't plan to go there. My body just moved on its own. Keys, jacket, and before I knew it, I was driving through the storm, heart racing faster than the wipers could clear the glass. When I reached the restaurant, I parked across the street. The warm glow from inside felt almost mocking. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. all of it too beautiful for what was about to break me. And there he was. Ethan, sitting at our favorite corner booth. His hand resting comfortably over hers, that same woman I'd seen before. She was smiling, leaning close, whispering something that made him laugh in that soft, familiar way that used to be mine. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, even though I wasn't inside it. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. I watched him feed her a bite of dessert, the same dessert we used to share. I watched him smile at her like she was his whole world. And that's when the tears came, hot, angry, relentless. For the first time, I realized how cruel love can be when it's betrayed. I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. I just watched until I couldn't breathe anymore. Then I walked away, cold, soaked, and silent. When I got home, I sat in the dark for hours. My phone buzzed. A message from him. "Hey babe, just finished work. Heading home now. Miss you." That single text, so casual, so effortless, broke something inside me. I laughed. A hollow, painful sound that filled the quiet room. He'd been lying so easily for so long that truth had become foreign to him. I opened his social media, scrolling through the photos of us, smiling faces captioned with words like forever and mine. They looked fake now, plastic, like props in a story that was never real. My chest tightened as I clicked on his tagged photos. And then I saw it, one picture posted just minutes ago by someone I didn't know. The woman. Her caption read, "Perfect night with him, or mine." I stared at it for a long time. The final proof. The knife twisted and this time it cut clean. My tears stopped. My breathing slowed. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't the heartbroken girl anymore. Not the one who begged for honesty or tried to make excuses for his absence. No, that version of me had just died quietly in that moment. And what rose from her ashes wasn't sadness, it was clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd been kind, patient, loyal, all the things he'd thrown away like they meant nothing. But now, he was about to learn what betrayal feels like when it's returned. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him to understand. That night, I made a promise to myself that he would never mock me again. He would never lie to me again. And when this was over, he would wish he'd never broken my heart. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. Eyes swollen, hair messy, tears drying on my cheeks, and whispered to myself, "You're done crying." It's his turn now. And just like that, the night everything changed also became the night my revenge began to take shape. The night I found out about his affair changed everything. But what came after, that broke me in ways I never imagined. I didn't confront him right away. For days, I pretended nothing had changed. I smiled when he texted. I answered his calls. I even met him for dinner, sitting across the table as he spoke about his long week at work, the same week he'd spent in someone else's arms. It was like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from, but I needed time. I needed to understand how deep the betrayal went. I started paying attention to his words, to the way he used phrases he once said only to me. "You're my peace." "No one makes me laugh like you do." Now they sounded empty, recycled, borrowed from what we once had. Then one evening I found what I wasn't looking for. He left his laptop at my place. Normally, I would have never gone through it. But something inside me said, "Open it." And when I did, I found everything. Messages, photos, emails, conversations where he talked about me, not with affection, but with mockery. She's so gullible. Still believes I'm working late. I swear she'd never suspect anything. She's sweet. Too sweet. It's kind of pathetic. I remember staring at the screen, my hands trembling. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper. The man I had loved, defended, trusted, was mocking me behind my back. It wasn't just cheating, it was cruelty. And the worst part? He was proud of it. He was bragging to his friends, laughing about how easy it was to keep two women at once. I felt sick. Every memory, every kiss, every promise turned poisonous in my mind. When he came over later that night, smiling like nothing was wrong, I couldn't even look at him the same. He hugged me and I stood still, my arms limp by my side. He pulled back, confused. "What's wrong?" I almost told him, but then I didn't. Because at that moment I realized something powerful. If he could lie this easily, so could I. So I smiled, forced, hollow, but convincing enough. "Nothing," I said softly. "Just tired." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and went to shower. I sat there, staring at his phone charging on the table. Every sound of running water in the background reminded me of his laughter in those messages, his mockery. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not with rage, not with tears, but with a terrifying calmness. I'd been humiliated enough, broken enough, played enough, no more. That night, I stopped being his victim. I started becoming his lesson. I deleted nothing. I saved every screenshot, every message, every cruel word. Each one became a piece of evidence, a weapon I'd use when the time was right. But revenge isn't about rushing in anger. It's about patience. I knew if I wanted to make him feel what I felt, I had to be smarter than his lies. So I played along. The next few weeks I laughed at his jokes again. Sent him morning texts, told him I loved him just like before. All while watching, listening, collecting. He thought he'd won. He thought I was still that gullible girl he mocked. But deep down, I was already rewriting the ending of this story. And when it was done, when every piece was in place, he would finally understand the pain of betrayal. Not through anger, not through screams, but through silence and exposure. The kind of exposure that doesn't just hurt your heart. It destroys your ego. That was the moment the humiliation turned into fuel. The night my heartbreak became my power. Because sometimes the best revenge doesn't start with hate. It starts with a smile that hides a storm. For days after I found those messages, it felt like someone had moved into my chest and was rearranging all the furniture. Anger, shame, a dull, hollow ache. Memories I used to smile at now felt like proofs of a crime. I kept picturing their laughter, his words like spit in my face. And yet, underneath all that noise, there was something else. A low, steady pulse of resolve that refused to be drowned. I cried. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies where everything is cleaned up by the end of the scene. My crying was small and stubborn, a slow leaking that lasted hours in the dark. I'd lie on the floor of my bathroom, knees to my chest, the light from the street lamp cutting lines across the tiles, and ask myself the same question over and over. How could he do this? It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the disrespect, the way he treated my love like a joke, the way he turned my trust into his entertainment. That cut deeper than anything else. But tears have a funny edge. After enough of them, something hardens. Grief begins to crystallize into clarity. The flood of emotion stops being random and starts lining up, like files on a desk. Heartache turned into facts. Facts turned into a plan. I started writing everything down. Not to wallow, but to organize. I wrote dates, messages, who he was with, where he said he was, where he actually was. I wrote what he said to me and what he said about me. I wrote down how his voice sounded when he lied, how long he took to respond when I texted late at night, what excuses he repeated. The list grew longer and clearer like a map. Why collect it all? Because I realized vengeance without proof is theater. It's chaos. And I didn't want theater. I wanted precision. I wanted him to see in cold light the web he spun and how easily it unraveled when someone finally paid attention. At first, the idea of revenge scared me. I'd always pictured myself as the kind of person who forgave, who tried to fix what was broken. That version of me still existed, somewhere beneath the rubble. But she had been used, and now I had a choice: remain shattered or build something new from the pieces. I chose to build. Planning turned into ritual. I'd wake up and go through the evidence, photos, screenshots, times. I learned his schedule like a second language. I learned when he left the house, when he checked certain apps, whose names popped up on his messages late at night. I watched patterns, and patterns are predictable. Predictability is power. I also started to watch myself. Anger can be a furnace that burns everything, including the person who carries it. I didn't want to lose myself the way he'd lost himself in lies. So I set rules. No public scenes. No slander. No violence. I would not stoop to the petty traps he and his friends would have loved. I wanted something smarter. Something that would hit where it mattered the most. His pride, his comfort, the image he'd built of himself. That meant patience. It meant waiting until all the pieces fit together. It meant staying calm while he bragged and laughed, pretending to be the same gullible girl he'd mocked. Irony is a quiet friend. Under the smile I practiced for him, I kept forging the plan. Under the "I forgive you" texts I sent to keep him close, I was planting seeds that would grow into exposure. I found allies in quiet places. Not friends to do my work for me, but people who knew the truth and could corroborate details. Maya was one. She'd been honest from the start and had watched him that night with me. She became my sounding board, the one who would read my lists and tell me when something felt weak. Sometimes I recruited someone to take a photo, or to confirm a time, or to save a message that would later prove useful. It felt strange at first, like assembling a team for a mission you never thought you'd lead. But there was a rightness to it, like fitting the last pieces of a puzzle. Every time I added another proof, another timestamp, another witness, I felt lighter. Not freed yet, that would come later, but lighter like a backpack losing weight. Each item removed the fog a little more. Each confirmation turned my sadness into something cleaner. Inevitability. There were nights I almost lost it. I'd see him laughing with her on some social feed and imagine the worst. I'd replay his words and feel the old wounds open. But then I'd remember the rules and the plan and breathe. I became an expert at breathing through betrayal. Deep inhale, count to 3, exhale, remember the map. And the map grew into a sequence, a slow, deliberate unspooling of his lies that would remove his excuses one by one. Public truth required an architecture. I drafted the architecture in my head at first, then on paper. I sketched scenarios, small exposures that would hurt his ego, careful reveals to people who mattered to him, colleagues, friends, family. Not out of cruelty, but out of a need to restore balance. If he could humiliate me privately, I would restore his dignity publicly, by showing that he had none left to defend. I learned to use technology like a scalpel. Screenshots, saved voice notes, even the metadata in photos that showed where and when they were taken. I reached out to people who'd been hurt by similar behavior, not to unite in hatred, but to build a record. The truth, when solid and orderly, has a weight all its own. Every step was planned with attention to detail. I tested the water with small probes. A friendly question to a mutual friend, a casual mention of something I heard, and watched his reaction. I demanded nothing dramatic from the world. I let it reveal itself. People always say the truth will come out by itself. Maybe that's true sometimes. But I wanted to be the catalyst. The transformation inside me wasn't only about strategy. It was about reclaiming my voice. For too long, I'd swallowed doubts and made room for his excuses. Now I practiced saying things I'd never said before. I rehearsed short lines. I deserve honesty. You owe me more than lies. I won't be anyone's side story. Saying them aloud in the privacy of my car made them real. Saying them in front of the mirror made them permanent. I didn't want revenge to become my identity, but I did want justice, to reclaim my story from him, to show myself that I was not defined by his choices, to teach him, in a way he would remember, that people are not props for someone else's ego. And then, one evening, after weeks of gathering, after nights of crying and days of quiet calculation, I closed my notebook and felt something like calm for the first time. Not relief yet. That would come when it was over. But a calm that felt like crossing a river and finding the shore. I whispered to myself, not angry this time, just steady. This ends on my terms. It was not bravado. It was a pact. The storm inside me had become weather I could predict and direct. Emotion was still there, but it no longer ruled me. I had turned pain into plan, grief into a map, humiliation into proof. Now the work began in earnest. The pieces were ready. The actors unwitting. The stage set. All that was left was to move, precisely, and watch as the truth finally reached those who needed to hear it. And somewhere between the hurt and the plan, I felt something strange and new. Not joy, not revenge's sweet taste yet, but a quiet confidence that I could survive this and come out steadier. That whatever happened next, I would not be the same frightened girl who once gave her heart away without a second thought. I closed my eyes, breathed in, and for the first time since that rainy night, I smiled. Not bitterly, but with a small, certain strength. The storm inside me had straightened into purpose. The revenge was no longer a dream. It was a path I could walk with my head held high. Forgiveness is a strange costume. It fits awkward at first, too tight around the throat, too warm against the skin. But if you wear it long enough, people start to believe it's the real you. That was the mask I chose. Not because I wanted to be dishonest again, but because a good disguise would let me move close enough to cut the threads of his lies cleanly and publicly. I rehearsed the performance like an actor preparing for the role of a lifetime. I texted him small everyday things. Hope your meeting goes well. Don't forget your umbrella. I love you. My voice on the phone softened into familiarity. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I let him hold me close on the couch while my mind cataloged everything he said and everything he didn't say. That closeness was medicine and poison at once. It kept him within reach while reminding me of everything he'd taken. People read forgiveness as weakness. He certainly did. His friends called him a lucky man. He walked taller, freer, as if the world had returned to the comfortable shape he preferred. But inside, I was doing the exact opposite, tightening the net. I made allies quietly. Maya was there, of course, but I needed more than one witness. I reached out to Olivia, a mutual friend who worked in the same circle as his new flame. Olivia had always been sharp, the kind of person who noticed small inconsistencies and kept receipts, figuratively and literally. She listened without judgment when I explained what I'd found. She agreed to be careful, to watch, to save anything that might help later. Then there was Marcus, a barista at a cafe he frequented. He was a quiet man with a camera on his phone and a habit of remembering faces. I bought coffee more often than I liked and learned his shift pattern. He didn't know my name at first, only that I was the woman who always ordered the same almond latte and sat in the corner. After a while, he started to recognize me, and on a morning when the cafe was empty, I asked him a simple question. Does he come here with a woman sometimes around noon? He said yes and promised to take a discreet photo the next time. It felt odd, recruiting people to watch the man I once called mine. It felt like a secret mission made of quiet transactions, trust traded for proof. But there is a strange purity to truth-seeking that felt different from the petty cruelty he and his friends had shown. This was not about shaming for sport. It was about restoring balance. While the allies did their small parts, I focused on controlling our shared world. I kept our apartment clean, made his favorite meals, and acted like I believed in the future again. I even suggested we visit his parents for Sunday lunch, knowing his mother would inevitably mention names and plans. Little conversational probes, casual mentions of places he liked to go, these were my tests. His answers were always too polished, too careful. He began to slip, just slightly, like a person who thinks they can hide a stain by standing a certain way. My digital detective work became more refined. I saved messages in multiple locations, copied conversations, took screenshots that included timestamps, and used apps that could show when photos were taken. Once, when he left his phone unlocked for a moment, I used that second to scroll through an email thread. There it was, a confirmation of a reservation at a place he'd said was work-related, complete with the reservation name that matched the woman's last name. Proof like this felt heavy and real, not the smoky suspicion that had followed me for weeks. I also planted whispers in places that mattered. This doesn't sound noble, but it was necessary. A casual comment to a mutual friend, "Isn't it odd he's suddenly so busy?" would prompt a conversation in which he'd try to defend himself and, if careless, reveal contradictions. Each little ripple caused him to swim more frantically in the shallows, making mistakes that I could later catalog. Emotionally, wearing the mask was exhausting. There were nights I wanted to scream the truth into the dark, to wake him and throw the evidence in his face and demand, why? But I remembered the rules I'd set. No public scenes, no violence, no personal attacks. Justice, not vengeance that mirrored his cruelty. So I breathed, drank tea, and took notes. I would not let my anger be my undoing. There were moments when the mask faltered. At a friend's birthday party, he raised a toast to new beginnings and clinked his glass with mine. I could feel the room tilt. I looked at him, up close, and for a second, the vulnerability I once felt flashed through. It was like looking at an old photograph of the man I had loved. Then he laughed at a joke the woman made, and the illusion vanished. I smiled, practiced and soft, and asked about his new project, all the while counting the beats between his words. Being believable took work. I learned to cry on cue when he mentioned something tender. I learned to ask about his day with genuine curiosity, so he'd let slip details he thought were harmless. I smiled at the right times and reached for his hand when the moment called. It felt like living two lives at once, one ordinary and soft and the other cold and precise. I also used social media carefully. I posted photos showing us together but cropped just enough to feel intimate without exposing everything. I liked his posts, shared old memories with captions that hinted at forgiveness, and in comments kept things light. The goal was to build an image, Sophie the forgiving girlfriend. It was a role that lowered his guard and raised the audience's assumption that everything was fine, which made the eventual reveal that much sharper. All the while I kept a ledger. Not just dates and locations, but small details that would make the story undeniable. The tone of his voice when he lied. The way he avoided eye contact when I asked about future plans. The exact phrasing he used about work dinners. I collected testimony from friends who had seen them together, saved receipts showing his late-night orders, and kept message screenshots organized by date and relevance. One evening, Marcus texted, "Got something. Noon today, cafe corner table. 2 people. My heart hammered, but I didn't move rashly. I told him to wait until he had a clear shot. He sent a photo 20 minutes later. Ethan at a table, laughing, the woman leaning close, their heads almost touching. The caption on the photo read like an accusation even though it was just a frozen moment. Too comfortable. I saved that photo in 3 places. I named the file with the date and his full name. It felt clinical, almost surgical. From chaos to cold clarity, there were small victories that I allowed myself to feel. A saved screenshot that confirmed a lie. A mutual friend who admitted they'd suspected something. A receipt that placed him somewhere he said he hadn't been. Each one fed the plan and calmed the storm inside me in a way brute anger never could. And yet, beneath the strategy, a quieter truth persisted. I still cared. It surprised me how true that was. Love doesn't vanish because someone betrays you. It changes shape. It becomes a barometer for how much you're willing to endure. For me, it became proof that I deserved better. As the weeks went by, the game continued. I was close enough to him to know the rhythm of his days, far enough to keep my evidence untouched and my cause uncorrupted. The mask of forgiveness hid in plain sight, a perfect camouflage. He boasted to friends, unaware that every boast was a breadcrumb. He mocked the world with his jokes, not knowing the audience was changing from complicit to witness. On the night I finally felt the structure of the plan click into place, I sat alone at our kitchen table with a single lamp on. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I spread out the evidence like cards and looked at them. Each piece connected to the next, a chain that led from the first lie to the most recent betrayal. For the first time in months, I felt steady. I whispered to myself, not harsh or triumphant, just determined. Soon you'll see. The masked game had done its work. He was ready to play right into the reveal. And I was ready to pull the curtain back. He began to believe his own story. Maybe that's what betrayal does to some people. It builds a fiction they live inside until they can't tell where the lie ends and who they used to be begins. Ethan started walking a little taller. He joked louder at parties. He told stories that were just bold enough to be noticed, the kind that made people look at him admiringly. Confidence became his armor, and nobody who hadn't seen the messages and the receipts would have guessed it was built on sand. That was my advantage. While he polished his image, I quietly tightened the web. The plan had always been about timing. Expose too soon and it looks like jealousy. Wait too long and it drifts into bitterness. So I watched him make the errors arrogance always invites. Small, careless things that would have been invisible to anyone not paying attention. There was the night he forwarded a joke about timing to a group chat with his friends and left his phone on the table. I sat across from him on the couch, pretending to scroll social media, and watched as the screen lit up with their laughs. He didn't notice me screenshotting. He didn't notice the way Marcus from the cafe later sent me an image he'd snapped of Ethan's table at noon. He didn't notice how easily his truth fit into the gaps I left. He began to repeat himself. He told the same lies in different rooms to different people. He bragged about being free and single-minded at work drinks, and never thought that someone would connect that language to the woman whose posts he liked. Overconfidence makes you sloppy. Sloppiness makes traces. I let him. There were nights when he came home drunk and felt invincible. He'd sing badly and then collapse on the bed with me in his arms like we were still partners in some private story. I would hold him, count his breaths, and memorize the cadence of his voice when he thought he was honest. That cadence would later be a line in the ledger, a phrase that matched a screenshot or an email header. I also set small traps, not to humiliate him for show, but to let him reveal himself without thinking. A casual question to a mutual coworker produced a careless answer. A throwaway suggestion to meet for brunch forced him to find an excuse. His excuse, when replayed later, contradicted an Instagram post. I kept a slow patience, letting the inconsistencies multiply like small cracks in plaster. One of the most powerful tools was silence. People who have something to hide try to fill quiet with noise. I learned to create deliberate silences at unexpected times, to ask a simple, calm question and then listen. He'd panic and talk, offering details without realizing it. Those details were gold. I recorded them, not in any invasive way, but in places where he volunteered the truths himself. He also had friends who loved the thrill of gossip. They were careless in ways I could predict. A late-night boast here, a mocking meme there. I watched them too because they were extensions of him. If he boasted about handling it, they'd laugh and add color. Those laughs became testimony, a pattern of dismissal that lined up with my evidence. At social events, he began to perform. People who believed his charm nodded and smiled. He'd talk about new opportunities and strange work partners. He laughed off questions about the future. The more he performed, the more I collected. Every flinch, every tiny over-explanation, every name that slipped in conversation was another thread I could tug. I never lost sight of my rules. No public shaming, no illegal digging, no threats. That kept me sharp. It also kept my conscience clear. I wanted the truth to stand on its own, not to be piled into a spectacle of cruelty. That moral line mattered because the end I wanted wasn't to break him beyond repair. It was to make him accountable in the world he showed to others. So I leveraged what was available and legitimate. Witnesses, timestamps, corroborating messages, pictures people voluntarily posted. I arranged for a few well-timed accidental conversations with people I knew would mention him in the right context. I let his arrogance supply the rest. People are the best evidence when they speak honestly, and sometimes a nudge is all they need to do that. There was an evening that stands out in my memory. He'd been especially cocky that week, bragging about an epic weekend he'd had. I organized a small get-together at a friend's apartment. Maya and Olivia were there, both briefed, both ready to listen. Marcus brought a photo without fanfare. Ethan at a rooftop bar with the woman, taken on a Friday when Ethan had told me he was working late. The photo arrived on a group chat as if someone had simply wanted to share a good night out. The image did what I could not have done with shouting. It made people pause. He saw the pause and filled it with a story. He told us the story he'd told before. A work event, a harmless night. His voice had that practiced cadence again. Only this time, his friends who'd been in the loop let slip a detail. A joke about how easy it was to keep things quiet. That joke felt like a small bell. I heard it toll and saved the sound in my notes. Ethan's overconfidence created a choreography I followed. He waltzed. I mirrored him. He got sloppy. I collected everything. He assumed loyalty was blind. I used that assumption to keep him inside my orbit long enough to let the truth accumulate into a weight no excuse could bear. At the same time, I had to protect myself from becoming the monster he'd claimed I was in those messages. Power can change you. It can make you cruel in the pursuit of justice. I checked myself constantly. Am I doing this to heal or to hurt? The answer became clearer with each piece of evidence. I was doing it to stop being trampled on. I was doing it to reclaim the narrative that had been stolen from me. And so I continued, quietly arranging the pieces. I made sure that when the reveal came, it would be undeniable and proportionate. It would expose the truth without descending into ugliness that would make me no better than him. There were moments of doubt, small ones like insects under glass. Sometimes I'd imagine confronting him directly, seeing the color drain from his face as the evidence sat between us. But direct confrontation could give him a chance to lie better, to spin again, to rally allies. Indirect exposure, built on careful corroboration, would not let him reconstruct his facade. By the end of that month, the pattern was undeniable. The ledger was thick with dates, screenshots, saved posts, witness notes, and a handful of carefully timed photos. Ethan kept speaking into the web of his lies, and every time he did, the web tightened. He dug his own grave not with malice, but with the everyday arrogance of someone who believed he was untouchable. He laughed at my supposed gullibility and voiced the very things that would topple him. I pulled the strings patiently, calmly, always a step behind his own missteps, letting his confidence do the work of exposing him. And as I watched him celebrate small victories that were no victories at all, I felt neither glee nor vengeance. I felt the cold, clean calm of someone who had learned to turn heartbreak into method. The stage was nearly set. The audience, our circle of friends, colleagues, and the people who mattered to him, was finally noticing those tiny inconsistencies I'd been cataloging. Their curiosity was shifting toward suspicion. I folded the ledger closed that night and felt something like peace, edged with resolve. The truth had weight now. It wasn't rumor. It was proof. All that remained was the right moment to let gravity do the rest. The reveal would need precision. It would need a place where the truth couldn't be dismissed as spite. I had it mapped out in my head like a scene in a play. Who would be there, how they would react, and most importantly, what he would say before he realized the net had closed. There was one last step before I pulled the curtain. One misstep I couldn't afford. And as I prepared for it, a small, steady part of me wondered, would the moment of truth feel as satisfying as I imagined? Or would it leave an ache that no broken ego could fill? Either way, the strings were in my hands now. I had learned how to make him dance. The finale was close. There's a strange silence that comes right before everything unravels. A silence that feels too calm, too still, as if the world itself is holding its breath. That's how the morning of the reveal felt. I woke up early, long before Ethan stirred, and sat at the edge of the bed, watching sunlight creep through the blinds. For months, I'd carried this storm inside me, the evidence, the patience, the quiet fire. And now it was time. The stage was already set. His company was hosting a mid-year celebration at a hotel downtown, a formal gathering with colleagues, friends, and partners. Ethan had spent the whole week boasting about being one of the key speakers. He loved the attention, the way people clapped for his confidence. He had even asked me to come along, calling it a fresh start for us. Fresh start. If only he knew. I dressed carefully that evening. Not for him, for me. A calm, elegant look. Confidence in every line, every movement. My heart was steady, my mind sharp. I'd spent nights planning this, making sure every detail was clean, factual, and undeniable. There would be no shouting match, no chaos. Just truth unveiled. When we arrived, Ethan was radiant. He laughed with his friends, charmed his boss, and told stories that made everyone adore him. I stood beside him smiling, my mask perfectly in place. The crowd loved us. The picture of reconciliation, the happy couple. They had no idea that every smile was a countdown. Halfway through the event, his boss announced an open session for team highlights, a showcase of recent projects and teamwork moments. Ethan had prepared a presentation, something flashy to show his commitment and loyalty. Ironic words. As the lights dimmed and his slides appeared on the screen, I felt my phone buzz in my hand. It was Olivia, the signal. Everything was ready. She was managing the projector feed that night as part of the coordination team. I had sent her a folder labeled Proposal Deck, Final Version, containing what Ethan thought was his presentation, but what he didn't know was that the real file would switch midway through. Ethan stood confidently on stage, microphone in hand. His voice filled the room. "Trust and integrity are the pillars of any partnership," he said proudly, smiling toward me. The irony was almost poetic. And then halfway through his speech, the screen flickered. For a heartbeat, nobody noticed. Then the slides changed. The first photo appeared. It wasn't his work project, and it was a screenshot. A text thread. The audience murmured. More images appeared, conversations, photos, timestamps. His own words, his mockery, the ones he thought were buried in private chats. "She'll never know. She's too naive. I could tell her I'm at work right now and she'd believe it. She's sweet. Too sweet. Almost stupid." Gasps filled the room. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan froze. His face drained of color. He stammered, this isn't..." But it was too late. The next slide showed photos. The cafe, the rooftop bar, the dinner reservations. Proof stacked upon proof. His boss's voice cut through the silence. "Ethan, what is this?" The microphone in his hand crackled as he tried to speak, his charm stripped away. His colleagues stared, some whispering, others recording. The same people who once admired him now saw the cracks, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. And I just stood there, calm, silent, unshaken. When he finally looked at me, there was no anger in my eyes. Just truth. Cold, undeniable truth. He whispered, "You did this?" I took a slow breath. "No, Ethan, you did this. I just stopped protecting your lies." He tried to laugh it off, desperate to reclaim control. "This is crazy. She's twisting everything." But before he could finish, Maya stepped forward. Then Olivia. Then Marcus. Each one spoke, one after another, calmly, clearly, confirming what they had seen, what they knew. Every voice was a nail sealing the coffin of his deception. The mocker had become the mocked. His arrogance melted into humiliation. The man who once bragged about his cleverness now stood exposed before everyone, colleagues, friends, even his superiors. There was nowhere to run, no version of the story that could survive the evidence now flashing on the screen. He dropped the microphone, eyes wild, searching for escape. But all he found were stares. The same people who used to laugh with him now looked away. And I felt no joy, no revenge high. Just release. The quiet, heavy relief of truth finally stepping into the light. I turned and walked out, not waiting for his excuses. Behind me, voices buzzed. Confusion, gossip, disbelief. The sound of his downfall. Outside, the cool night air felt clean. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Revenge hadn't been the point. Truth had. And in that moment, I understood. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to scream or destroy. It's to reveal, to hold up a mirror and let them see themselves, exactly as they are. He had mocked my trust. Now the world mocked his lies. The stage lights dimmed behind me, the applause gone, the laughter turned to whispers. And with every step away from that hall, I left the wreckage of his pride behind. The story he'd written, the one where I was naive and forgiving, ended there. Because that night I became the author. When the last word was spoken and the last whisper faded, the world felt eerily quiet. The chaos had passed, his lies, his arrogance, his smug laughter, all silenced by the truth that stood tall before everyone. He looked shattered, not because of what I did, but because for the first time in his life he couldn't lie his way out of it. I stood there, watching him crumble under the weight of his own choices. There was no satisfaction in seeing him fall, not the kind I expected anyway. The revenge I had dreamed of for weeks. It didn't bring fireworks or triumph. It brought stillness. A silence that echoed louder than his betrayal ever did. People who once admired him now avoided his eyes. Friends he boasted about had quietly stepped away. Even his so-called new love disappeared into the shadows the moment the truth surfaced. He was alone. And for the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt free. That night, I went home, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat in the same spot where I had once cried my eyes out over him. The same window, the same soft rain outside, but a completely different me. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't the girl who waited for someone's loyalty or begged for someone's honesty. I was the woman who found her strength through pain. The silence after the storm is a strange thing. You expect peace, but what you really get is clarity. Clarity about who you were, what you allowed, and who you'll never be again. I realize revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it simply means standing tall while they drown in their own truth. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. I just walked away, letting the silence speak for me. Because real power doesn't shout. It whispers, and it's heard by those who once underestimated you. In that stillness, I found my closure, not in his downfall, but in my rebirth. I smiled for the first time in months, truly smiled, because I had learned something priceless. Revenge fades, but self-respect, that stays forever. It's strange how life teaches you the hardest lessons through the people you trusted the most. Looking back now, I don't see him as the villain of my story anymore. He was simply the test that showed me who I really am. The pain, the humiliation, the endless nights of wondering why me, all of it shaped the person I became. A version of me that no longer breaks when someone walks away. Betrayal changes you. At first, it shatters every piece of your heart. You start questioning your worth, your judgment, your entire sense of reality. But once the dust settles, something incredible happens. You rebuild. Piece by piece, stronger, wiser, sharper. You stop chasing closure from people who never intended to give it. You stop explaining yourself to those who were never listening, and you finally learn that self-worth isn't proven by how much you're loved, but by how much you can stand alone. Revenge gave me a voice when I had none, but growth taught me when to put that voice down. I realized justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the silence of not responding, the peace of not caring, the strength of walking away. He lost me, and that was his real punishment. Because when you betray someone genuine, the loss isn't temporary, it's permanent. Today, if you ask me whether I'd do it all again, I'd say yes, but not for him. For me. Because that journey turned me from someone who begged to be seen into someone who knows her own worth without needing validation. So if you've ever been betrayed, remember this. Don't let it destroy you. Let it rebuild you. Don't let their lies define your truth. And above all, don't lose your kindness trying to get even. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming untouchable, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. In the end, I learned the most powerful lesson of all. The people who betray you break the version of you that needed them, so the version that rises never will. And that's a kind of victory no one can take away.